Imagine the whole church discovering their passion to care, one small group at a time. You're listening to this special podcast series, Care Journey, from the Journey with Care podcast. Welcome to another episode of Journey with Care. We are in the midst of our Care Journey series. If you haven't listened to our previous episodes, you want to make sure you catch up. This series is highlighting some of the topics key for Care Impact and part of the small group course that we're developing. We're just giving you a taste here of what our small group course is like. If you want to get more into it, visit careimpact.ca/care journey, and you can get on the waiting list there to make it part of your small group. Really encourage you to do that. It's valuable. We've had nothing but great feedback so far. Also want to remind you that we have Journey with Prayer, a 5-minute devotional series to start off your week. That's on a separate feed, or you can find it at journeywithcare.ca. You can get it early there on Friday, the same time this one releases. Otherwise, you get it Monday. So make sure you check that out. Today, we have a special guest on with us, Marlo Fox, and I'm going to get Wendi to introduce Marlo. But before we get into that conversation, I want to remind you that we can only continue to produce great content because of the generosity of our listeners, our donors of Care Impact. And if you want to support our work in the community, if you want to support the podcast, head over to journeywithcare.ca, and there are some links you can click there to be able to support us and the work that we are doing in the community. Or you can just go to the show notes and there's some links there as well. Wendi, you want to introduce our guest?
Absolutely. I'm delighted to introduce our friend to Care Impact, Marlo Fox. She comes from Ohio in the USA and works with an organization as the executive director of Think Tank. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Wendi. It's so good to be here with you.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about Think Tank and your role? And I'm curious. Let's stop there. I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to ask what got you there.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit about Think Tank? We've really appreciated the work you've done, but tell us a little bit more about it.
Yes, so Think Tank just turned 18 years old. I can't even believe it. I'm one of the co-founders of Think Tank and have had the joy of working with teams all across the United States. So as you mentioned, Wendi, our work originated here in Southwest Ohio, and our mission is to equip groups to rethink poverty and to partner directly with people that are affected for change in community. And so with that, my own journey started out. Previous to this role, I was in social work. I worked in workforce development. And so in that role, I got to know people in my community that were struggling to get into the workforce and actually have a living wage job. And so I was working day in and day out with families right here that were navigating poverty. And what I learned through that was, our answer, certainly in the United States, is the answer to poverty is just get a job and make more money. And as I got more deeply acquainted and involved in people's lives, work's important. And that was very rewarding. We were designed to work, right? To create, to contribute to our community, to other people's lives. And yet there were, numerous barriers that people were encountering just to get into the workforce or stay in the workforce. And all of them was this kind of complex, interconnected web to poverty. And so I had the privilege to be able to found Think Tank with the idea that we needed to work more holistically rather than in our silos. And so that meant doing a lot of capacity building and equipping work with groups that were on the ground, interacting with people, navigating different aspects of poverty, and to work to be a convener to bring those groups to be more effective in their work and to build solutions with people that were navigating poverty instead of to them or for them. And so we've been at this for 18 years, and I'm sure we'll talk about how that's evolved, but that's a little bit of our history.
Yeah, and well, I've sat in through some of your sessions and your curriculum, and even as you've been creating some of the curriculum and been a guinea pig, and I just have really appreciated the content that you have delivered, your team has created. And what I find interesting is, you're right, like when we think of poverty, we're thinking of how do we problem solve for the people that are in poverty. What I've really appreciated about your team is that you're working with people that are in poverty, saying, how do we build capacity for those who want to care? And you're really building the capacity of not how to get a job in this sense, which there's places for that as well. There's a need for that. However, you're building capacity in the local church. You're building capacity in the local community. How do we respond? How do we interact with that? Because poverty affects us all, but we're just not all as vulnerable. But how do we contribute? How do we neighbor well? And I've really appreciated that you're working with people and not just for them. And I really have appreciated. You shared a little bit, Marlo, about what got you started in Think Tank and why you created, why there was a need for this organization. But what led up to that beforehand, before you were working? What were those aha moments? You were having an ordinary life, but did you grow up desiring to be in this space of poverty alleviation and capacity building, or were there these aha moments that got you there?
Yeah, I appreciate that you said moments, because I think for most of us, it's not a lightning bolt revelation. There are lots of things that happen in our lives that continue to build into our calling and reveal truth in our lives. And so I think I would say the same was true for myself. I did not personally grow up in poverty, but I became well acquainted with poverty as a young adult. I married somebody that did grow up in poverty, and then began working in this space. So I think that perhaps my journey is similar to others who have taken that road, maybe gone into a vocation wanting to help based on maybe certain faith callings or skills or gifts and care. And then realizing as I got into it that I thought I could help, but actually I also got helped, if that makes sense. And so I think that was, again, a series of aha moments based on maybe some faulty or incomplete paradigms. Is that I feel like so often we see the responsibility for poverty alleviation setting on the shoulders of those who are in poverty, and it's them that need to change. And very quickly I realized, oh, I need to change. And so and this is an ongoing process and will be for the rest of my life. But I think there were a number of things along the road that contributed to those awakenings for me. Something real concrete story. Initially, when I got into workforce development, part of what we were doing, we were offering GED classes. So in the US, that's the equivalent of a high school diploma if you drop out of school. And I actually came back from college. I'd gone out of state, came back to my hometown, and was working in the school district where I grew up. And we had people coming to our GED class that I had grown up with. I had no idea they had dropped out of high school. And so this revelation of like, wow, was I in a tunnel? Like, how were these people invisible to me, you know?
Yeah.
And so just realizing my own maybe isolation or my own focus on myself and how I needed to be alert to parts of my community that were invisible to me and the pain that was invisible to me. So just a number of things like that. The other thing, again, I was in the position as a social worker to help others. So there was a power imbalance there, right? I was the one that was supposed to have the answer as a young person, you know, and then I found myself in conversations with people that were my clients, and they were pouring into me. They were giving me some answers for things that were going on in my life. So this idea of, again, doing for, or the helper has the answer solution to more relationships of mutuality, which is, I think, a much healthier place to be as helpers or as just people that want to come alongside neighbors in good ways. So yeah, it was a number of those things, Wendi, that have shaped me and continue to shape me in how I think about this work.
See, Marlo, this is why I love you. There's so many good nuggets there, and I hope our audience has paid attention to those. It's just so true. Like, and it shows in the curriculum and the resources that you are producing, that it is created with, and the people going through poverty become our professors. They're actually contributing to the solutions. It is so much more complex than the individual's bank account. And you're right. Poverty is hidden in plain sight. We don't know what poverty looks like in the day-to-day, and I think the individualism and the privacy of people's lives in our society contributes to that. It doesn't alleviate poverty when we sit in our silos. There's so much more than meets the eye. Let's talk a little bit of poverty. What are the things that you have learned? Surely poverty is more, you've alluded to it, is more than just not having money or a job. What are the ways that we could all identify with areas of poverty that we might even be impoverished and not realize?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that just the recognition that our brains, I think, shut down to complexity a lot of times. We want to make it about that one thing. And the deeper you get into learning about people's lives, there is a lot of complexity there. But I think at the core, we understand because we are in bodies navigating a real physical, tangible world. And we have a spiritual dimension to us, and a physical and emotional and a mental dimension to us, and that's true for all of us. And so I think like that's when you look at our work, Think Tank's work, that's why we center it on the human impact of poverty, so that we can take a human-centered approach to alleviating poverty, right? And so there are these very tangible realities of physical needs. You know, we have housing insecurity and food insecurity, and and all these things are undergirded by economics, right? But there are numerous things that keep us maybe from being economically stable. And so, as I mentioned, when I was doing workforce development and I got involved in people's lives and would help open up opportunities perhaps to affirm their gifts and to get into a job, there were those tangible things that we often think about, such as barriers like transportation, childcare, housing, food insecurity, and all those things come out and cope, right? But also, what happens is this individualism you talk about, Wendi, and even scarcity mentality that we carry around, I think that has created isolation that compound those factors, right? And so there's an emotional dimension to that. There's trauma that comes into that. There are a number of things that contribute to our well-being. And so as we look at rethinking poverty from our standpoint, it's really anchored on centering on the human impact and taking a relational approach. So no matter what issue you're going to work on, I would say if we can be grounded in those things, how can I see this through a human lens? And what can I do to take a relational approach? The other thing I think we get ourselves into is we want a quick fix. And we oftentimes want to step into poverty alleviation in very episodic ways, or transactional ways. And so, hopefully I can challenge myself and we can challenge our listeners here, Wendi, that, I think if more of us think about like where maybe is God calling me to make a longer term commitment, longer term relational commitment. Again, if we think about our human experience, where have we been changed? We've been changed where people have made a long term relational commitment in our lives. So, and that often starts with just one step in an openness to what's right in front of us, really.
And I think it's easier than people think than what we fear.
Yes.
Like you and I having a conversation, we find things in common. Our prefrontal cortex is predisposed to find that connection, that relational capacity. But sometimes when we think, oh no, they're maybe in a different economic status or they don't have a job, somehow we've got to fix, or we freeze up. That's the amygdala talking, and we can actually relate well. But if we could only human to human, like Jesus did with the Samaritan woman, or the high officials to the disciples disciples, he was human to human, no matter their status, but could we relate? And we have to address that fear that prevents
Right.
us from actually being able to connect in a meaningful way. But it's easier, it's accessible. People actually can do that.
Right.
But we have to reframe and I have to pay attention. Where is fear setting in when I'm sitting in front of a person? Is there fear? Because that actually is going to inhibit my ability to have a meaningful connection, regardless of if they want to talk to me or not. It's not about forcing a relationship.
That's right.
It's about the posture. People know when they're a project or when they're a friend to be with.
Absolutely. And I think our nature, again, because we do at our core want to alleviate pain and suffering, our nature is to go to fix, particularly if we're in a position where we have resources and we're compelled to help and all of that. And yet, as you say, Wendi, sometimes our best approach is just taking time and creating space to listen.
Yeah, it's that withness. It's not about fixing. And I think sometimes we want to ease their discomfort because actually we're discomforted by it.
That's
We
right.
want that. We want
Yes.
that discomfort, that pain to go away. We don't want to see that suffering because we can't handle that.
It's very true. It's very true. It's hard to sit, and we understand this intuitively, right? Because we've been through our own grief and we've gone through grief with others. You know, when there's a death, it's really hard to sit with that, right? But presence
Right.
is mostly what people need. And so, again, I think it's like you said, when there's that fear, it's like, what can I go back to that's relatable about being human? And I also think trying to fix things is different than lightening someone's load. So what do friends do? We don't go around fixing each other, but we do think about how can I lighten somebody's load right now?
Yes.
And again, that's just a way to simply lean in and take a next step. It's not about erasing everything that's here that's contributing it from an individual level and systemic level. That's a recipe for paralysis. But if we can start to say, how can I lighten the load? Is there anything I can do to come alongside? Is there a way that I can listen and learn? Then what happens is that my next step starts to be unveiled, I think.
And that's where I love the utilization of the care portal, care sharing technology,
Yes.
because that's where social workers and caseworkers who are walking alongside and they know where the needs are in the community. They're working with them in their distress and they're able to work with, and we train the social workers to work with the families and the youth and the vulnerable sector and saying, what are those things that you need to lighten your load that aren't being resourced anywhere else, but if you
Right.
could have a relational intervention, what would that look like? And they get creative together, and that's where those stories come up that we put onto our website through the care portal, and that's how churches can meaningful. So we take that guesswork out, and again, we keep having to push back against that transactional understanding. Oh, if I only get that bed, and we just like drop it off and go. No, actually, this is a connection point. They've said yes to community when they put their story out there. They've said yes. I'm willing to have that meaningful connection, and this is simply a tool to help bridge that. Now, you've been working with Care Portal. We've been working with Care Portal, and you've developed this amazing COPE experience, cost of poverty experience. I can't wait I think we got to segue there because we're actually, good news, Canada. We just got it through customs and we're bringing it to Canada. But can you tell us about this COPE, cost of poverty experience that you have developed with your team?
Yeah, so I did mention the first part of our mission is to equip groups to rethink poverty through that human lens. And so we have found one of the most effective ways to do that is by inviting people into the stories of others. And so the other thing that, Wendi, I know Care Impact creates a lot of resources and training and equipping tools for churches and community groups. And so what we understand then in this space about adult learning, how we do learn and change and grow and become more effective is we have to immerse ourselves. The information has to be relevant. It's got to be more than stuck in the head. We've got to embrace it emotionally, and we've got to be able to apply it. And so that's why I think COPE has been so effective, is that it is a simulation. And so it it is a 2.5 hour experience that invites people to take on the role of families, much like families in their community that are navigating poverty day in, day out, and to put themselves in the shoes of their circumstances and to make some decisions about how they think they may navigate those circumstances. And we don't just leave it there at the simulation. So we simulate 1 month in the life of those families, broken down into 4 weeks. But we don't stop there. Then we have a conversation about what insights did this give you, and what does this mean for us both individually and collectively. And so what that experience is like is we've actually interviewed families all across the United States now. We started with a group of families in Ohio, and then we recently updated this experience to interview families all across the United States to just hear their stories in their own words about kind of some of their presenting challenges, about their family dynamics, about the way in which they told their own story or kind of made sense of their own story. And so what it does is it gives us a chance to think about poverty through the lens of that individual, but to also see what the community system looks like and where the community system, inclusive of the local church, is an asset and an ally to families that are navigating these hard times, and where there may be barriers that collectively we could come together to resolve.
Well, and that's what I appreciated about the COPE experience. The church was at the table. They were a literal table there, a presence there, and it really drives home the point of collective impact. That you're right. We try to simplify poverty, that we just need a job table, right? Or we just need whatever social services table, and then they should fix it. And yet you're brought into this immersive experience, and there's a variety, just like a community. It's represented there, and people in these roles that you were needing to interact with. And when I went through it, now I've walked with a lot of people in poverty. I am that foster and adoptive mom that it's not new to me. I have worked with, my husband worked with the incarcerated. I have worked with anti-human trafficking. And yet when I put myself in that immersive experience, Marlo, I'm not proud of this, but I tried kidnapping my virtual daughter so that I could keep my rent and that I could keep everybody safe, because I had one job. I wanted to keep everybody together. And that mama bear instinct, I'm like, whoa, I know the rules. I work with social services. And yet when it really simulated that, and it made me like, what are my choices? And it created that dynamic, and not everybody had that same experience. But for me, it's just like, actually, this becomes a viable option right now. And then we went into a debrief, and we could share about those experiences, which was really powerful to hear, and to kind of drop that vulnerability curtain, I think is so necessary within the community, within the church, that we could talk about it, that it's not just about pathologizing those going through these actual situations.
Right.
But what was going on? What were the barriers? What were those blind spots that were like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I held on to this. We don't know what we don't know, right? It's that Johari's window. And it really helps people understand a little bit better. It's not going to be everything, but it puts us on that pathway. And we're so excited to bring that to Canada. You are training one of our staff, and we're hoping to have more staff across Canada, and a kit that is being prepared here. And we're so excited to bring it here, that we can actually go into different cities, different churches, different organizations. Why? Not just so that they have this poverty experience debut, but it's like, this can be a stepping stone, a catalyst for being that human to human, being that relational presence in community. And so, we're excited that you are letting it come to Canada, first time over the border, and it's faith inclusive. It really drives home the point of Care Portal, and we couldn't be more excited to partner with your team, you and your team, to have this experience up in Canada.
Well, thank you. We're excited to learn with you. And just to affirm your experience, Wendi, for your audience, I would imagine that there would be a number of people that could attend or be invited to or attend this experience that come from a whole spectrum of lived experiences. And so you might have thought, like you said, I'm immersed in this, I know this. And so we can be proximate, but again, not necessarily see through certain eyes, and everybody's experience is unique. And so whether you're proximate or you're isolated, or we've even had some individuals that have grown up in poverty and have some lived experiences, and they got some insight as well. Maybe they had a kind of a bigger picture view of what was maybe driving certain factors for their own family, or they were in the role of someone that may have had different kinds of dynamics. And so no matter where your starting point is, I think if you come open, there's something here for you.
I'm just going to jump in here to remind our listeners that we have our Decadent Care Summit coming up, where we are actually running a cope on the Saturday morning. So if you want to get in on that, you want to get in on that very quickly, because there's limited seating. So you want to head over to decadentcare.ca and register. Make sure you're in for that.
Yeah, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Only 120 spots. So if there is still a spot, I would say get that weekend pass. We're giving it to 120 people for the weekend pass for Decadent Care. So sign up at decadentcare.ca and be part of this immersive experience. And not only that, we're going to follow that up with actual opportunities to serve the community. So people will be put into teams and be able to respond to real care portal needs across the city. They're going to be working in small little teams and going to be blessing families across the city of Winnipeg as a way for people to experience what it could look like in their cities, in their communities. And so we want to invite you warmly into the city of Winnipeg for this experience. For those of you that cannot be part of this experience but do want to experience it in your own city or in your church, your organization, if you want to catalyze people in your community to talk about poverty, to experience it in a new way, we invite you to contact us. Go to our website or contact us at info@careimpact.ca. We'd be happy to bring our team to you and serve you in this way. Marlo, let's talk about the local church. What are some words of encouragement or some advice that you would give for local churches who are wanting to make an impact, wanting to grow in their capacity to walk alongside those experiencing poverty?
Yeah, I think the encouragement I would like to give the local church is that one of the strengths, I had the great privilege of growing up in a local church. And when I think about how formative that was for me, and the way that the local church helped me grow in my understanding of being a disciple of Christ, I didn't think about, or I don't think about great youth programming or an awesome children's choir or the Christmas event. Those are just containers. And so my encouragement to the local church, I think a lot of times we apply this program mentality to poverty alleviation. We've got to come up with some program or 10 different programs, and there's some great programs out there, and they can be great facilitators or containers. But the question I think local churches have to ask themselves are more closely aligned with the strength that they have, which is relationship. And so what context do we have? Where are places where we could hang out with people that we don't normally get to hang out with in our community? And, maybe that's through our partnership with Care Impact and Care Portal. That gives us a proxy to hang out with people or meet people we don't normally get to meet. Or maybe it's a basketball court, in our parking lot. Or maybe it's a grill that we can fire up and, grill some hot dogs on the weekends. I don't know if you guys grill hot dogs on the weekends. I can't do that. Not say that. But I think we're oftentimes asking the wrong questions. It's not, what's the program we need to develop to fight poverty? It's like, where are the places where we can meet people?
Yeah.
And then just be willing to show up and be willing for God to nudge you in that one next step. And that may be individually something I'm being drawn to in a one next step. Maybe I do need to be open to a relationship that could foster and grow. And maybe it's that one next step corporately, something that we learn or hear that we can partner on as a church to bring, just like power and community. So that would be my encouragement. to the local church. Don't create any unnecessary barriers or think that you have to be on your own or the hero.
Yeah.
Just look for places you can show up because the community desperately needs you in the hope of Christ.
Well, that smells a lot like Jesus.
Yes.
Showing up at the well, at the lake, in a fishing boat, in the places where people hang. And if you are a community leader or a person sitting in the church saying, how can I make a difference? How can I actually make a difference? It might be easier than you think. And yet also in Canada, it might be more difficult than we think because people don't know how to people well. It's countercultural at this point, often to sit with people. And let us know. We're having amazing conversations with leaders from across Canada, different cities that are paying attention to what Care Portal could do because we can help take the guesswork out of that compassion and say, actually, here are some opportunities. And now pour yourself, rather than looking for programs and projects, pour yourself into these relationships. We're going to bring it on a Monday morning, a Thursday evening, a Saturday afternoon. This isn't a program. These are people to walk with. They're inviting you in, and these are opportunities to do so. But you're right, that well might be a basketball court. And
Right.
so it might be easier than we actually think. Well, Marlo, I am so excited that we can journey this with you. I'm so appreciative of the resource of the cost of poverty experience that we get to now share with Canada. And we want to hold it with a lot of integrity, the work that you have put into it. And we know that this experience will help, that conversation will help move the needle along for the church to be in these places in meaningful, relational, humble ways. And we want to thank you for 18 years ago saying yes to Think Tank, to doing this venture, and for continuing it on with the resources. We can't wait for what God is going to do in the future.
Thank you so much, Wendi.
Thank you for joining another conversation on Journey with Care, where we inspire curious Canadians on their path of faith and living life with purpose in community. Journey with Care is an initiative of Care Impact, a Canadian charity dedicated to connecting and equipping the whole church to journey well in community. You can visit their website at careimpact.ca or visit journeywithcare.ca to get more information on weekly episodes, Journey with Prayer, and details about our upcoming events and meetups. You can also leave us a message, share your thoughts, and connect with like-minded individuals who are on their own journeys of faith and purpose. Thank you for sharing this podcast and helping these stories reach the community. Together we can explore ways to journey in a good way. And always remember to stay curious.